It's time, y'all. This chassis on the ground, on the tires and wheels, right here, right now on this episode. We're gonna start immediately by getting this rear end in. I've got everything done and painted and ready to go. And I am ready, Freddy. So, putting in, I'm gonna put the lowers up first. One down, 3 to go. Here's, you see I'm just using a long bolt and a spacer. It just makes it easier to handle, is all. That's all. Ooh, I should have worn my knee pads. And there we go. We got her as good as whoop now. Alright. Alright, so let's see, left. Now I marked these because when I cut these washers on these, they're not exactly the same. They're to best fit this thing articulated down further on the left side when I drilled them, re-drilled them, so it matters which is which. Y'all notice I'm not tightening any of these up yet. I'll put it all together and then I'll tighten it up. Now we got something we can work with. Get bolts on this thing. Now I'm putting all my nuts out towards I'm putting all my nuts out where I can see them, just for inspection, where if something's coming loose, maybe I got a better shot at catching it. Drop you over there. And we're just gonna throw the 20 on it for now. Man, drop that jack down. You know, 9-inch rear end's pretty heavy. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna let you hang. You just sit right there for a second. There's that. Yep, that's good, that's perfect. Sit right there. You're good. I'm gonna go ahead and, of course, bead locks for the right rear. Stagger wise, all of these wheels and tires are going to be very close. I got about 1 inch of stagger here on the back across, and on the front it's going to be about 1 inch as well for the 4 used tires that I'm putting on it. Alright, so if you watch when we did the fuel tank installation plan for the chassis right here, of course it's in front of the rear end and everything. It's really tight fit, it's an exact fit, to be honest. Yeah, this was designed for this exact tank. It just works out. It's right against the bottom where it can't be any lower, it cannot be any higher. Now you'll see, like we talked about in that video, if you hadn't watched that, go back and check that out. But I've got 3 bolts that go through on the flange, drilled through the flange for the tank itself, bolted to the frame on each side, and then turn around. The rules require you to have straps. I didn't like the idea of flat straps. I wanted to go one step further, so I actually went with a big thick piece of square tubing, made that up, got some mounts welded onto the chassis here, and then turn around on the back. I've got 2 pieces of threaded rod, squeezing it all the way down right here to this main tube going across the frame. And what I did is I cut me some 1/4 inch pieces of rubber, and I actually put me some silicone, just some RTV, and I siliconed the rubber down to the tank. That way if these come loose or I take this off and move it or whatever, they stay in place. And then I don't have to worry about anything happening with vibration and the rubber's working their way out from under it. And now they're not going to move anyway, because I actually took and tightened this down until I got pinch on it. You know, so I'm bolted down to the frame, but then also my top is pinched as well down from that standpoint. And of course, it's a 1/8 inch plate up underneath this fuel tank. It's got a solid 1/8 inch plate between the rear end and the housing. And of course, that gives me good protection from the bottom of the tank because it is on top of the drive shaft. So we wanted a solid plate right there for that reason. All right, let's go do the front. All right, of course, solid steel bushings. We'll go way back on videos where we talked about these. But I want to make sure I remind you, when you put these in for the first time, make sure you grease them and don't just put them in dry and depend on the alamites, because that grease isn't going to necessarily work across the whole thing and you might gall it before you ever even get started good. So we're going to put some grease on those, just a little bit. Of course, I just use that Lucas Red and Tacky grease for everything on the race car. Everything from wheel bearings, alamites, just wherever, whatever. I just use one grease. I don't get complicated with the grease. You did the prep work on the front end and got the alignment and everything on these done. Then whenever you were figuring out your solid bushings and stuff, then they'll just go right in. If you did not do the prep work and align those holes, then right here is where everything's going to come to an abrupt halt. So if you want to check out about solid bushings and stuff, go back. Like I said, a lot of the slow part was in all of that prep work that we did way back last year. But hopefully, there's one. Oh yeah, there's one. Let me get in here and get this other. Now, I'm sticking the bolt through toward the front. That way the point on the head of that bolt, is sticking forward, because I'm going to use it as a reference for ride height when I'm setting that ball joint, the center of the ball joint, to the fulcrum for the lower control arm. I'm using the center of that bolt right there is what I'm talking about when I'm doing that. All right. That, come on through a little more. And that's what you want. That lower control arm is just like a door hinge. We want it to be that smooth with no slack. That is perfect. It's like that. So let's get them on there. All right, let's get her together here. Got her weight jack. There she goes. I got a Hyperco 9.5-inch spring. This is a 850 going on the left side here. I'm gonna put a 750 on the right side, 850 on the left side. That plan, and when I bought the springs and everything for my package, I was planning on having a bump on that right side. Not really gonna run on the bump, but the bump would be what it would sit down on if it needed it. I kind of like to use a bump as a backup. And so I may have to change springs, but we're gonna go to the track and we're gonna see where we're at. And if we have to raise the ride height on the front too much in order to make that 750 work, because we just end up collapsing all the way down and just deadheading our lower control arm out against the frame, because at that point you'll go infinite, in your weight. When that happens, it'll shear that tire contact patch. And if that's happening to us, then we will have to go up on the spring. But we're gonna see what it does. We'll video all that and show it and stuff. We'll learn it together. On this spindle, I have prepped this spindle for a Heim joint right here instead of a regular tie rod end. So check this out. On these spindles, of course, factory, they run a tapered bolt for the tie rod end that's going to fit onto the spindle. But we're going to run a Heim joint, okay? Like that right there. And this end of the spindle has got to be modified. And we modify it for a 5/8 bolt to go through it. And this bolt is specifically for this. This is a hardened grade 8 bolt just for this application. And so that's got to be drilled out, but you got to be careful how you do this, or you can really mess your spindle up, because it has to be square to the spindle, or it has to be fairly close, because we're going to put the bolt through and then we're going to run, a bump correction, and it'll be modified. I'll make this custom length for our application, and then the heim joint will be on there, okay, on that spindle, and that's how that's going to work. So we've got to take the tapered hole the way it was, and we've got to convert it where we can drop this bolt through. And the problem is if I get this hole off and there's an angle on it, then this bump spacer, when it's on it and everything, and we've got the heim joint, when we tighten it up, if there's angle in that setup against this surface right here, then just with fatigue and wear and stuff, it's going to be very hard to keep a bolt tight. And when you really grip down and tighten the bolts up on this thing, what it's going to do is it's going to bend the bolt. Okay, so you want it to be square, you know, to this arm on the spindle. Now I was going to show you, I use a drill press. And if you'll look, that's flat across there. All right, I flatten that off where I can just take it, sit it up on a drill press, and drill it where I can get it flat. Look at my stock one. They're not all the same. Some have got this notch, some it's bigger, some it's down below where it's not a problem. But that notch right there has to go. I want to show y'all how I do this right quick. I got one here I hadn't done yet. So all I do is throw it up in the vise, got it clamped, and I just take a cutoff wheel and get it flat to it. I'm doing that right there, getting that flat, and then this isn't necessarily the right way or the best way, and if you had better machinist tools, you definitely could do this other ways. The point is, we're trying to make sure we drill this hole where that it is flat to this bottom where the bolt is going to have washers and stuff, where I'll have a spacer come up on it. It really needs to be flat to that surface. That is the reason. And so I just take and I can, now I've got something for a guide to go by. Okay, so we drilled that out. Okay, and I just want to show you using the drill press like I did right here. What we're trying to accomplish is putting the bolt through. Bolt should not wiggle. Do not over drill this. Need no movement in this bolt right here. 5/8 to 5/8, okay? But when I put my bump spacer right here on, I don't have a gap anywhere around this. If I have a gap anywhere around this and I tighten it up, it puts bow, puts twist in it. And then that's a problem. That's going to create, which it's going to bend the bolt, okay? And so now if the bolt turns or moves, you take it apart, you put it back together, that bend is somewhere else, you're bending it in another direction, where you're creating inconsistency in your toe setting on your car. You take things apart, you put them back together, now settings are going to change and stuff. It's a problem, okay? So like just using that press like I did, cutting that off and just holding that flat was good enough that I got this down there right. I can tell you from experience, when I used a hand drill trying to do this, I messed up and I messed this up. And then I had to cut and grind and reflatten. I mean, you can fix it, but you've got to flatten it to whatever it was. And so now it doesn't point straight down, you know, from your spindle anymore. It's different. It'd be different from side to side. So I don't know what all problems that introduces, but I don't want to introduce it if I can keep from it. So anyway, that is the end of this public service announcement. Back to the build. No, this is a 9.5 inch upper control arm going on the left side right here. All right, so let's get this on. These washers right here are my spacers that go all the way back to the original setup where I was working out my roll setters and everything. So if you haven't looked at that video, check this playlist, go back to the beginning of it, and you'll see where I came up with my design. One side down, one to go. All right, so again, 750 spring over here, might end up changing it. Not gonna be dishonest about that. We're gonna see how it works. I got a feeling it's gonna be a little soft. Got a feeling I'm gonna go up at least to an 800 or 850. May get some springs, some additional springs ordered before I ever get to the track. That way we can run, maybe put a GoPro on it, run it, and then, you know, go up on the spring and see where we're at. Gotta do something. All right. We gotta get these hubs on, but I want to talk about these hubs right quick. All right, so I needed some 5-on-5 hubs to fit those spindles, and so I ordered these from mail order catalog, one of the big ones and everything, and it comes with races in it. There is no scenario where I would use that race. It's not match set, and I have no idea where it come from or the quality of it. I've been running Timkins for years. I like the Timkins, and I buy the match sets, you know, race and bearing. And like I said, it may be the greatest race ever. No scenario where I would ever use that and then match it with some separate roller bearing. Not gonna happen. Not gonna do it. Anyway, so these have got to go. Ouch. What does it even say? It says it's a XCYF, whatever that is. Not gonna happen. All right, so they're out. That's that. Now, like I said, match sets of Timkins. So I'm gonna put. All right. All right. You saw me take a punch and knock these old races out. All right. And of course, I'm on the back of this knocking it out. I know I'm not going to reuse it. Do not use a punch to knock these in, because if you miss and you run down that edge, you've ruined it. So just be warned on that. You know, I'll take a punch and knock them out all the time from the back. But as far as driving them in, I always find a driver of some sort to make that work. All right, there's the back one. Let's throw the front one in. And if you've never done these before, even, you know, obviously an arbor press is ideal, but again, use what you got. But you'll know when you hit bottom. It's going to clearly change on its note. There's going to be no question about has that race hit bottom. Yeah, I don't know if y'all could tell that, but that was on bottom. Okay, next up is the bearings themselves. All right, and so the question is, now they make some really, really good low viscosity, high pressure grease. Lucas Red and Tacky, and I would much rather just change it often. Now, as far as friction in your bearings, I want to tell you where some of it's coming from. You're packing all of this grease into your wheel hub, and all of that grease is having to be carried. So it's carrying it because you got it filled up. So you got the outside housing, you know, of the hub itself, and then you got the inside spindle, and you're carrying that grease between the two, and so it's constantly having to work between the two. And I have learned that I can put grease on this bearing itself, on the surfaces, down between the cage, just like this right here, and I can put that in that hub, and I can run for a season, and when I pull this bearing out, that grease will be right there. It doesn't run out, it doesn't go dry, you don't have to fill the hub up. You know, it's not like an oil bath. You know, in an oil bath, the oil runs away. It's not how this grease works. And so, for me, I just don't. I don't fill them up. I put the grease that it needs on the bearing itself, I don't fill the hub up, I don't pack grease in it, and you know, when I service it, and I typically don't pull the bearings. So I change the filter every 3 races. I change the oil every 6 races. It's on those 6 races that I pull the bearings. And all I do is take them and I put them in the parts washer. I rinse the grease off of them. I put some fresh red and tacky on them. I take a rag and I wipe the inside of the hub completely clean. And the main thing that I'm really doing there, y'all, is just resetting the lash on it, because, you know, I don't run the spacers. Again, it's a money thing. It's good stuff. Not saying it's not good stuff. It is. It's good stuff. But it's a money thing. And, you know, if you keep your lash set on these, they're just as free. There's no issue. You know, if you do your maintenance on them, you don't cram them full of grease. You run a good bearing like a Timken. Anyway, so there it is. And, you know, I've got the cage full of grease. But you see, I really don't have grease everywhere on this. So I'm just going to take, so it's full, and I'm just going to dab a little bit around on the outside, and I'm going to drop it in. That's all it's getting. That's it. Do the same thing on the other side. That's it, folks. And we're going to put, now remember, when you put your wheel seal in, your bearing, it's in there. It's a I think I believe, yeah, it's a one-way trip on these two. Some of these will go through, some won't. But anyway, this is a one-way trip. All right. I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on that inside of that seal. Remember, your flange goes out on that flange. This is only one way this will go. I try to run, this is a national seal here. I try to run brand name seals. Does make a difference. These things will come apart. And when you get wearing bearings, it's from either running extremely tight lash, extremely loose lash, or you have ripped your rubber out and you have ingested dirt into it. It's going to be one of those 3 things. On dirt, I'm not talking about asphalt, right front on asphalt, I know gets a tremendous amount of pressure. But on dirt, in my opinion, if you are keeping up with your lash and you're never ingesting dirt into the bearing, you shouldn't be changing bearings, you know, during the life of a race car chassis. I mean, it should last the duration of that chassis. All right, so get on there. All right, so that is ready on that side, and then. Come here. Do the same thing on this side. Now, none of this spindle right here needs grease. There's nothing turning on the spindle. It's the inside of the bearing. But the seal is running right here on this back side on this land. So I'm just going to rub just a little bit of grease. Now rub some grease on the seal as well. Just a little bit of grease right there. I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on those threads right there. That's good. All right. And then get up on there. Alright, so there that is. Remember, it's not a regular washer. It is a spindle washer with a notch in it where it will not turn. This is what keeps your nut from getting backed off. Of course, there's a cotter pin goes in it as well. But now these bearings are new, these races are new, and the first time they'll run and see weight on them and get worked around, like even driving around in the yard or just test driving to make sure everything works, not even on the track, they're gonna loosen up a little bit, I can tell you. And so for that reason, same as the rear, I'll initially load the lash on those tight. And when I say tight, I don't mean like tight, but I won't leave any intentional lash in them. I'll pull it down. You know, and then it's going to loosen up. And that's just like right here, that turning. All right, and leave me a comment if you think different. Don't hate me. But that's like, you see how that stops spinning? And I'll loosen that up, you know. So like that's loose. That's friction of the wheel seal, okay? So I can go buy the most expensive bearing it is. I put that wheel seal on the back. It's gonna act exactly the same way. That's not the bearing, that's the wheel seal. All right? And you know, if I pull the wheel seals off and I spun these, they'd sit here and we'd run out of film. It would still be spinning. Well, it wouldn't go forever, but it would spin. So, you know, real world, y'all. Real world. Spend the money in the right places. Hey, this right side, I throwed it up on here without the seal on it, and because I just wanted to show you, you know, I mean, you do what you want, but you know, as far as where to put the money and everything, I'll run this all night long and be very happy with it. So, just wanted to show you. Like I said, I'm gonna put the seal on it and everything, and you know, it's gonna slow it down and everything, but just as far as the bearings themselves, just run good bearings. So, anyway, that's just my take on it. Hold up there. All right, let's get a seal on this thing before I forget it. We grease those bearings, and then we handle this rotor. And we've got to bed these brakes. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by having grease on this rotor to start with. So, clean the grease off, y'all. For sure. Let's get this caliper on. Of course, we had rebuilt our calipers already in a previous episode. And I've got my pads here. These pads are the Hawk DTC 30 pads. And I was just thinking, when did I get turned on to these? I went to a school that Hayden Taylor, Tony Jackson Jr., and Bill Fry held several years ago. It was really good. It was just on street stocks. They raced real heavily over at Batesville and Wheatland, the Lucas Oil Speedway. They're real big over there. And anyway, I went to a chassis school that they had, and they're the ones that were talking about these pads and why they were really good. And man, they were right. They are a great all-temperature pad. I have not looked back and run them ever since. But anyway, okay, on these bolts right here that we are putting in, we're putting just a little bit of anti-seize. If I put a lot of grease on these bolts, all it's going to do is grab dirt. So really, all I want is just some anti-seize on them, a little bit on the threads, and beyond that, I don't know that I'm doing any good. Now, don't go crazy tightening these up. They do their job laterally, not tightness this way. That's not what holds them on. So just thread them up, snug them up, stop. Yeah. So like I said, now I'm using new caliper bolts because just you don't really wear a caliper bolt out, but they rust and pit and stuff. I didn't have, all of mine look terrible. Again, pull those rubbers out, because that's just something that'll make it glue up and seize up and unevenly wear. I want this thing to be able to move. All right. So now, snugging these up. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Didn't take a lot. Besides that, I'll have this off for inspection. That's it. That's all I'm doing. Now, as far as the cable here goes, you see I've got a tab, a weld-on tab, and when we run our brake lines and everything, we're going to set this. We'll figure out our maximum drop down and our maximum turnout, and we'll figure out that right spot for that to be, and then we'll weld it in place and run all our brake lines and everything. It'll be great. That's coming up, like I said, next episode. So if you're not subscribed and following the playlist and everything, subscribe, folks. This is good stuff. All right, we're gonna do both sides here, put the tires and wheels on it, and we're fixing to drop this lift and see this thing sitting on the rubber. Get this over with, y'all. All right, put some rubber on this side. This is a big step for me, y'all. Getting one sitting down, rolling on the ground, that's a big deal. Y'all, that's a ton of work to get to this point. But I'm super excited. Just getting one down and on the rubber and everything. It's just that major milestone, you know, like from here out, you know, I know what to do. I've got all of my stuff and everything ready to go. And it's just a matter of a couple of weeks of just piling it all in here. The only delay there is just getting the footage of all of it along the way. So we're gonna have a lot of videos here in short order. But next video is going to be brake lines. We're going to run all the brake lines and everything, show how that works. And then I know y'all see those tie rods are not in on these front wheels. But the reason I didn't go ahead and do that in this video is because I'm going to do bump steer. And I want to do the bump steer as a separate video because that's going to take some time to go through that. We're going to put that out on the board, kind of show the logic behind it, how it works and everything. So we'll do the tie rod ends and the bump steer and all of that. And somewhere in there, we're going to throw the engine and the transmission back in. It just bolts in, but I got to get that in there because I need to get that measurement, make sure I get the right drive shaft to go in on this. If you've been following along on this build, you know at this point just how much work this is. You can take the amount of time on the videos and multiply that by 10. It's pretty serious amount of work right here. And the purpose of this channel is to educate, it is to promote the sport and everything. But I make no bones about it. I'm looking for sponsors of our channel. We got all of our races coming up. We are trying desperately to have this car ready to go for the Golden Egg Challenge in Mississippi in April. We're going to try to make that our opening debut. We're trying to set up a schedule for races up to 8-hour drive out from where we live here in West Tennessee because we want to show out in a bigger regional area as we can, how that you can build everything yourself and can compete at that top level. If you like this content and you agree with what we're doing, we are seeking those sponsors of our channel. Check out the description in all our videos. It's got where you can join up, pick the appropriate amount for what would be right for you to sponsor and support us. Makes a huge difference. It's going to help us be able to make more shows and get this out further to a larger audience. I definitely appreciate y'all and look forward to the next video because it's coming in just a few days. Thank y'all.